She walked into the courtroom wearing a designer dress paid for by a dead man's credit card, convinced she was walking out with his empire. Jessica Miller, a 24-year-old waitress, had everything she needed to destroy the grieving widow. A handwritten promise, a team of sharks for lawyers, and a secret that she swore would secure her place in high society. She looked at Catherine, the wife of 30 years, and saw nothing but a defeated old woman. But Jessica forgot one thing. Lucian Sterling didn't build a multi-million-dollar fortune by being careless, and Catherine didn't stay married to him by being blind. All it took was a single, yellowing document from a bank account that didn't exist to turn Jessica's golden ticket into a prison sentence. The rain in Seattle didn't wash away the grief. It just made it heavy. It soaked into the wool coats of the mourners gathered at the Lakeview Cemetery, pressing down on the silence. Catherine Sterling stood by the open grave, her posture as rigid as the black umbrella she held. At 55, Catherine was a woman who wore her dignity like armor. She didn't cry publicly. Tears were private currency, and she wasn't one to spend them in front of the city's vultures, the business partners, the rivals, and the fake friends who had come to see Lucian Sterling put in the ground. Lucian had been a titan in real estate, a man who turned a small loan into the Sterling Development Group, a company that owned half the skyline. He was charismatic, loud, and, as Catherine knew better than anyone, deeply flawed. His heart attack at the age of 62 had been sudden, collapsing on the 14th hole of the Broadmoor Golf Club. As the priest murmured the final commendations, a ripple of unease moved through the crowd. It started at the back, a collection of whispers that grew louder than the falling rain. Catherine didn't turn around. She didn't have to. She knew exactly who it was. The click-clack of high heels on the wet pavement was unmistakable. It was a sound that didn't belong at a funeral. "I'm sorry, miss. This is a private service," a security guard whispered harshly, though his voice carried. "I have just as much right to be here as she does," a female voice snapped back. It was young, shrill, and trembling with a mixture of nerves and entitlement. Catherine finally turned. Standing at the edge of the mourners was Jessica Miller. She looked out of place, not just because of her age. She couldn't have been more than 25, but because of her attire. While everyone else was draped in somber charcoal and black, Jessica wore a navy blue trench coat that was belted too tightly, and underneath, the flash of a dress that was slightly too short for the occasion. She held a cheap umbrella that was buckled against the wind, but it was her face that drew the stares. She was pretty in a fragile, doe-eyed way, with blonde hair that had been carefully curled. Her mascara was running, a deliberate streak of tragedy down her cheek. "Lucian loved me," Jessica announced, her voice cracking. She stepped past the security guard, who looked toward Catherine for a signal. The crowd parted. It was the kind of scene Lucian would have hated, messy, public, and emotional. Jessica walked right up to the grave, ignoring the gasps of the socialites and the glares of Lucian's business partners. She threw a single red rose onto the mahogany casket. "He promised me," she whispered, loud enough for Catherine to hear. "He promised me he wouldn't leave me alone." Then she lifted her gaze to Catherine. It wasn't a look of apology. It was a look of challenge. There was a fire in this girl's eyes, a hunger that Catherine recognized instantly. It was the hunger of someone who had tasted the good life and was terrified of going back to the menu at a diner. "He told me he was leaving you," Jessica said, her voice gaining strength. "He was going to file the papers next week. I am his family now. Me. Not you." The silence that followed was deafening. The rain seemed to stop, suspended by the sheer audacity of the moment. Catherine looked at the girl. She didn't scream. She didn't slap her. She simply adjusted her leather gloves, her face an unreadable mask of calm. "Miss Miller," Catherine said, her voice smooth and cold, like polished steel. "This is a place of rest. If you wish to discuss fiction, save it for the courtroom. I believe the service is concluded." Catherine turned back to the priest and nodded. Jessica stood there, chest heaving, realizing she hadn't gotten the reaction she wanted. She wanted a scene. She wanted Catherine to break down, to scream, to look like the bitter, discarded wife Lucian had painted her as. Instead, Catherine looked like a queen dealing with unruly peasant. Humiliated but fueled by adrenaline, Jessica hissed, "You think you're keeping the money? You think you're keeping the house?" He signed it over. "I have proof. I have everything." She spun around and marched away, the heels clicking furiously. As the car ride home began, Catherine sat in the back of her Rolls-Royce, watching the rain streak the window. Her lawyer, Sarah Jenkins, sat beside her. Sarah was 40, sharp-witted, and had been the Sterling family attorney for a decade. "She's going to be a problem, Catherine," Sarah said softly. That wasn't grief. That was a declaration of war. "I know," Catherine replied, finally allowing her shoulders to slump just an inch. Lucian was a fool, Sarah. He liked to feel like a savior to broken things, but he never realized that some broken things have sharp edges. Did he sign anything?" Sarah asked, the lawyer in her taking over. "This girl, Jessica. She's a waitress at that diner near his office. The Rusty Spoon. We knew about the lunches, but—" "He paid for her apartment," Catherine said, staring out at the grey city. "He paid for her car. He paid for her acting classes. But his fortune? The Sterling Trust?" Catherine turned to Sarah, a small, grim smile touching her lips. "Let her sue, Sarah. Let her bring everything she has. Because Lucian might have been a cheater, but he was also a paranoid narcissist, and he left something in the safe deposit box that even he didn't know the full value of." 2 weeks after the funeral, the lawsuit hit Catherine's desk with a heavy thud. Miller versus the estate of Lucian Sterling. It wasn't a small claim. Jessica wasn't asking for a payout. She was asking for half. She was claiming palimony, constructive trust, and producing a handwritten codicil to the will that she claimed Lucian wrote 3 months prior. To understand the audacity of the claim, you had to understand Jessica Miller. 3 years ago, Jessica had been working double shifts at the Rusty Spoon, a greasy spoon diner 3 blocks from the Sterling Development headquarters. She was 22, drowning in student debt from a cosmetology degree she never used, and driving a Honda Civic that shook when it went over 50. Then Lucian Sterling walked in. He was a whale, waitress slang for a customer who tipped big and ordered the expensive steak without looking at the price. He was older, distinguished, and wore suits that cost more than Jessica made in a year. It started with coffee, then lunch, then the lingering conversations. Lucian was lonely at the top, or so he told her. He complained about a wife who was cold, uninterested, and married to her charity galas. He painted a picture of a loveless marriage where he was merely a walking checkbook. Jessica, wide-eyed and attentive, listened. She poured him coffee and sympathy in equal measure. She made him feel young again. She made him feel like a hero. Within 6 months, Jessica had quit the diner. Lucian set her up in a luxury condo in the trendy Bellevue district. He bought her a Mercedes. He gave her a credit card with a $20,000 monthly limit. Jessica remembered the night he promised her the world. It was a Tuesday. They were drinking champagne on the balcony of the condo he paid for. "I'm tired of hiding this, Jess," Lucian had slurred, his face flushed with alcohol and infatuation. "Catherine doesn't understand me. She doesn't need me. She has her own money, her own life. You need me." "I do, Lucian," Jessica had cooed, running a hand through his thinning grey hair. "I'd be nothing without you." "I'm going to change the will," he had said, slamming his hand on the table. "The business, the liquid assets. Why should she get it? She'll just donate it to some cat shelter. I want you to have it. I want you to be secure." He had grabbed a napkin, a cocktail napkin from the bar, and a pen. He scribbled furiously. "I, Lucian Sterling, being of sound mind, hereby declare that upon my death, 50% of my liquid assets and the Bellevue property shall go to Jessica Miller, my true companion." He signed it. He dated it. He handed it to her with a sloppy grin. "Put that in a safe place, baby." Jessica had looked at that napkin like it was a holy scripture. She didn't know the law. She didn't know that a cocktail napkin in Washington state has a very high bar to clear to supersede a formal will drafted by top-tier estate attorneys. But she believed it. Because she wanted to believe it. Now, sitting in the office of Arthur P. Harrington, her lawyer, she felt invincible. Arthur was a strip mall lawyer who advertised on the backs of bus benches. He wore shiny suits and smelled faintly of tobacco and desperation. But he was aggressive, and he was working on contingency. He only got paid if Jessica won. And looking at the assets involved, Arthur was drooling. "You say he gave you gifts?" Arthur asked, leaning over his cluttered desk. "Yes," Jessica said, pulling out a binder. She had been meticulous. Receipts for the car, the jewelry, the trips to Cabo, and the texts. "Look at the texts." Arthur scrolled through the printed screenshots. "Lucian, you're the only one who gets me." Lucian, "Can't wait to be free of her." Lucian, "Just hold on a little longer, baby. The lawyers are drafting the divorce papers." "This is gold," Arthur muttered. "Gold. We can prove he intended to divorce her. We can prove you were his common law wife in spirit, if not on paper. And this?" He held up the cocktail napkin, now preserved in a plastic sleeve. "This is the smoking gun. It's a holographic will. It shows intent." "So we're going to win?" Jessica asked, leaning forward. "Win?" Arthur laughed. "Honey, they won't even want to go to trial. Catherine Sterling is a society woman. She cares about her reputation. The last thing she wants is for us to drag Lucian's dirty laundry through the public courts. We're going to allege that he was pressured by her, that the marriage was a sham. We'll threaten to release all the details of their sexless life. She'll settle. We'll ask for 20 million. She'll give us 10 just to make us go away." Jessica smiled. $10 million. She deserved it. She had put up with Lucien's snoring, his old man complaints, his erectile dysfunction, and his endless stories about golf for 3 years. She had earned every penny. "File it," Jessica said. "I want her to know I'm not going away." The first hearing, the preliminary hearing, took place at the King County Superior Court. It was supposed to be a procedural matter, a scheduling of dates. But Arthur Harrington wanted to make a splash. The courtroom was packed. The press had caught wind of the cocktail napkin mistress, and the benches were filled with reporters. Catherine sat at the defendant's table, impeccable in a cream-coloured suit. She looked bored. Beside her, Sarah Jenkins was arranging files with precise, calm movements. On the other side, Jessica sat in a modest black dress, trying to look like the grieving widow. Arthur stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honour," Arthur boomed, playing to the cameras at the back. "We are here to rectify a grave injustice. My client, Ms. Miller, was the devoted partner of Lucian Sterling for the last 3 years of his life. She was his confidant, his lover, and the woman he intended to spend his remaining years with. We have evidence, irrefutable evidence, that Mr. Sterling considered his marriage to the defendant over long before he died. He waved the photocopy of the napkin. He promised her his fortune. He wrote it down. He signed it. We are simply asking that the court honor the final wishes of a dying man." The judge, a stern woman named Judge Reynolds, looked over her glasses. "Mr. Harrington, save the theatrics for the jury trial if we get there. Miss Jenkins, does the estate contest the validity of this napkin?" Sarah Jenkins stood up. She didn't boom. She didn't wave her arms. She spoke softly, forcing everyone to lean in. "Your Honour, the estate absolutely contests the validity of the document. Furthermore, the estate contests Miss Miller's characterization of the relationship. Mr. Sterling was a generous man, perhaps to a fault, but he was also a man who compartmentalized his life." Sarah paused, glancing at Jessica. We are prepared to show that Miss Miller was not a partner, but a paid companion, and that the funds she has already received, totaling over $400,000 in 3 years, constitute the entirety of any settlement she might feel entitled to." "Paid companion?" Jessica shrieked, jumping up. "I loved him. He loved me." "Sit down, Miss Miller," Judge Reynolds snapped. Arthur put a hand on Jessica's shoulder to calm her. "We have the texts, Your Honor. He said he was leaving her." Sarah smiled. It was a terrifyingly pleasant smile. "People say many things in text messages, Your Honor, especially when they are trying to maintain a specific arrangement. But actions speak louder. And Lucian Sterling's financial actions were very specific." Sarah picked up a single file folder. It wasn't thick. "We will be submitting a motion to dismiss based on the unclean hands, doctrine and fraud. But more importantly, we will be submitting evidence regarding the ownership of the assets Ms. Miller is claiming." Sarah turned to look directly at Jessica. "You see, Ms. Miller believes Lucian Sterling owned the Sterling Development Group. He did not." Jessica froze. Arthur frowned. "What are you talking about? He was the CEO." "He was the CEO," Sarah corrected. "An employee, but the owner, the majority shareholder who controlled the assets, the trusts, and the bank accounts?" Sarah slid the folder toward the judge. "Lucian Sterling transferred majority ownership of all his liquid assets and real estate holdings into the Sterling Family Irrevocable Trust 15 years ago. A trust that has a single, ironclad trustee with sole power of appointment." Sarah pointed to the woman sitting calmly in the cream suit. "The money wasn't Lucian's to give Miss Miller. Might add, the checks he wrote to you. Might add, the checks he wrote to you." The courtroom went silent. Jessica felt the blood drain from her face. He had an allowance," Jessica whispered, the reality crashing down, the big shot, the whale, the tycoon. "He was a figurehead," Catherine spoke for the first time, her voice carrying clear across the room. "He liked the fame. I liked the control. He couldn't give you my fortune, my dear. He could only give you the scraps I let him have." Arthur Harrington looked at the documents Sarah had slid over. His face went pale. He realized his 30% contingency fee just evaporated. But Jessica wasn't done. Denial is a powerful drug. "You're lying," she screamed. "He hid money. He told me he had accounts offshore. He said he had a secret account that you didn't know about. The Cayman account." Catherine's eyes narrowed slightly. "If such an account exists," Judge Reynolds said, intrigued, "it would be subject to probate. Do you have proof of this offshore account, Miss Miller?" "I have a number," Jessica said, digging into her purse with shaking hands. She pulled out a slip of paper. "He gave me this. He said, 'If anything happens to me, call this banker in Grand Cayman. Give him this code. It's the safety net.'" She held up the paper triumphantly. "This is the money you don't control, Catherine, and it's all mine." Catherine looked at the slip of paper. For the first time, a flicker of genuine surprise crossed her face. Not fear. Curiosity. Sarah Jenkins leaned over to Catherine. "Did he?" she whispered. "I didn't think he was smart enough to figure out how to open one," Catherine whispered back. "This changes things," Judge Reynolds said. "If there are undisclosed assets, we need a full accounting. Discovery is granted. We will reconvene in 1 week." Jessica smiled. It was a vicious, victorious smile. She thought she had found the loophole. She thought she had won. She didn't know that by revealing that account number, she had just opened a door that would lead to something far darker than a simple affair. She had just invited the FBI into the courtroom. The drive back from the courthouse was silent, but it was a different kind of silence than the funeral. That had been the silence of finality. This was the silence of calculation. Catherine Sterling sat in her study, a room lined with mahogany bookshelves and smelling of old paper and expensive scotch. The rain beat against the large bay window overlooking the Puget Sound. In her hand, she held a crystal tumbler of amber liquid, but she wasn't drinking. She was staring at the flames dancing in the fireplace. He never mentioned a Cayman account to you? Never? Not once in 30 years? Sarah Jenkins was pacing the room. The lawyer had shed her blazer and was now rolling up the sleeves of her silk blouse. She looked less like a corporate attorney and more like a detective working a cold case. Lucian couldn't keep a secret to save his life, Sarah, Catherine said, finally taking a sip. If he bought a new putter, he told me. If he made a good deal, he bragged about it for weeks. He was a man who needed applause. Then why hide this? Sarah asked, stopping in front of the fire. Jessica Miller produced that account number with a level of confidence that worries me. She believes it's real. And if Lucian managed to squirrel away $5, maybe $10 million outside of the trust, then Jessica has a claim. And worse, the IRS will have a claim. We could be looking at tax fraud investigations that could freeze the entire Sterling estate. Catherine swirled the ice in her glass. Lucian was terrified of two things, being poor and being irrelevant. The trust made sure he was never poor, but it also meant he had to ask me for capital for his ventures. He hated that. Catherine stood up and walked to the window, watching the grey water. Find out what's in that account, Sarah. But be careful. If Lucien was hiding money, he wasn't doing it alone. He wasn't smart enough to navigate offshore banking laws. Someone helped him. Across town, in a brightly lit bar that played pop music too loudly, Jessica Miller was ordering a second bottle of Dom Perignon. "To justice!" she squealed, clinking her glass against Arthur Harrington's. Arthur looked uncomfortable. He was looking at the bill. "Jessica, maybe we should slow down. We haven't won yet. The judge just granted discovery. That means we get to look for the money. It doesn't mean we have the money." "Oh, stop being such a buzzkill," Jessica laughed, her cheeks flushed. She pulled the crumpled slip of paper from her purse, the one with the code. She treated it like a winning lottery ticket. "He told me, Arthur. The last night I saw him. He was intense. He grabbed my hand and said, 'Jess, if the world falls apart, this is your parachute.' He said there's enough in there to disappear." Arthur leaned in, his greed warring with his legal instincts. "Did he say how much? Did he say where it came from?" Jessica waved a hand dismissively. "He said it was his deal money. Money Catherine didn't know about. Money from the real deals he did without her looking over his shoulder." "Deal money," Arthur muttered. "That usually means cash, off the books." "It means I'm going to be rich," Jessica said, pouring more champagne. "And Catherine, that old witch is going to have to write me a check. I can't wait to see her face when she realizes Lucian loved me enough to break the law for me." Jessica didn't see the danger in her own words. She saw romance where she should have seen liability. She saw a parachute, unaware that Lucian had actually handed her an anvil. 2 days later, the initial report came back. Sarah Jenkins walked into Catherine's home office. She didn't sit down. She placed a single sheet of paper on the desk. "We found it," Sarah said. Her voice was tight. Catherine put on her reading glasses. "And?" "It's not a personal savings account, Catherine. It's a corporate shell account at the Cayman National Bank. The entity is called Rogue Wave Holdings. It was opened 4 years ago." "4 years ago," Catherine mused, "just before he met the waitress." "Here is the problem," Sarah continued. "We can see the balance. It's sitting at $12 million. Catherine raised an eyebrow. $12 million? Lucien didn't have $12 million in liquid cash to hide. His allowance was generous, but not that generous. Where did he get it?" "That's the mystery," Sarah said. "But here is the twist. The account is frozen." "Frozen? By whom?" "By the bank itself. There are irregularities. High-risk flags. It looks like money went in, but it never came out. Lucian was using it as a repository, but he never made a withdrawal." Catherine looked at the paper her mind racing. Lucian, her foolish, vain husband, had been playing a game she didn't know the rules to. Jessica Miller thinks this is her inheritance, Catherine said softly. If she claims it, Sarah warned, she claims ownership of the entity. Rogue Wave Holdings. If she fights for this account, she legally steps into Lucian's shoes as the beneficiary of that company. Let her, Catherine said, a cold realization forming in her mind. Let her claim it. But Sarah, I want you to dig deeper. Find out who put the money in. Because if Lucian didn't take it from our accounts, he took it from somewhere else. And I have a terrible feeling I know where. The charity, Sarah whispered, horror dawning on her face. The Sterling Foundation was Catherine's life's work. It funded orphanages, hospitals, and art programs. If he touched the foundation money, Catherine said, her voice trembling with a rage she had suppressed for 30 years, then Jessica Miller isn't just fighting for an inheritance. She's fighting for a felony. The conference room at Jenkins and Associates was designed to intimidate. The walls were glass, offering a dizzying view of the city below, making anyone sitting at the table feel suspended in thin air. The air conditioning was set just a few degrees too cold. Jessica Miller sat on one side of the long granite table. She wore a white suit today, trying to project innocence, but her knee was bouncing nervously under the table. Arthur Harrington sat beside her, shuffling papers, trying to look prepared. On the other side sat Sarah Jenkins. Catherine was not present. She didn't need to be. A court reporter sat at the head of the table, fingers hovering over the stenotype machine. A video camera was pointed directly at Jessica's face. "State your name for the record," Sarah said. She didn't look up from her legal pad. Jessica Marie Miller. "Ms. Miller," Sarah began, her voice deceptively gentle. "You are claiming that the deceased, Lucian Sterling, intended for you to have the assets held in the Cayman Islands account, ending in 4922. Is that correct?" "Yes," Jessica said, chin up. "He gave me the number. He called it my safety net." "And you have stated in your affidavit that you were aware of Mr. Sterling's business dealings? That he confided in you?" Arthur Harrington cleared his throat. Objection. Vague. "I'll rephrase," Sarah said, locking eyes with Jessica. "Did Mr. Sterling tell you where the $12 million in that account came from?" Jessica hesitated. She remembered Lucian's vague boasts about cutting out the middleman and smart business. "He said it was money he earned," Jessica said. "He said he was a genius at real estate, and that his wife held him back. He said this was money he made on his own. So, to your knowledge, this was valid income from his business efforts?" "Yes." Sarah nodded slowly and made a note. "And you are asking this court to transfer the full ownership of Rogue Wave Holdings to you, based on the handwritten note and his verbal promises?" "It's what he wanted," Jessica insisted. "I deserve it. I took care of him when she ignored him." Sarah reached into a box on the floor. She pulled out a thick binder. The sound of the heavy binder hitting the table made Jessica jump. "Ms. Miller, are you familiar with the term forensic tracing?" Jessica blinked. "No." "It's a method used to follow money from its source to its destination," Sarah explained, opening the binder. "Since you provided us with the account number, thank you for that, by the way, we were able to subpoena the transaction records for Rogue Wave Holdings." Sarah slid a single document across the table. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a photocopy of a wire transfer request. "Please look at Exhibit A," Sarah said. "Can you read the sender field for the first deposit of $2 million, dated 3 years ago?" Jessica picked up the paper. Her hands were shaking slightly. She squinted at the text. It says, "Sterling Hope Foundation." "Correct," Sarah said. "The Sterling Hope Foundation, a charitable trust dedicated to building pediatric wings in hospitals. And the next deposit? The one from 2 years ago for $3 million? Jessica looked. Sterling Hope Foundation. And the last one? Jessica didn't want to look, but she did. Sterling Hope Foundation. The room went deathly silent. Arthur Harrington stopped shuffling his papers. He looked at the document, and the colour drained from his face. He looked at Jessica, then at Sarah. Lucian Sterling, Sarah said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming hard as diamond, was not a business genius, Ms. Miller. He was an embezzler. He was systematically siphoning money from his wife's charity, money meant for sick children, and hiding it in an offshore shell company. Sarah leaned forward. And you just testified, under oath, that he told you about this account, that he told you it was his money, that you were his confidant. I didn't know, Jessica stammered. He told me it was deals, real estate deals. But you are claiming ownership of it, Sarah pressed. You are petitioning the court to give you the proceeds of a crime? In legal terms, Miss Miller, by accepting this money, you would be accepting stolen property. And since you admitted he discussed the account with you, a prosecutor might wonder if you were a co-conspirator. No, Jessica shouted, standing up. I didn't steal anything. I just wanted what was promised to me. Sit down, Jessica, Arthur hissed, pulling her arm. Shut up. I won't shut up, Jessica cried, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time. He loved me. He wouldn't leave me dirty money. He wouldn't. Sarah watched the breakdown with zero sympathy. She reached into the box again. We have one more document, Ms. Miller, the bank document referenced in the case title. Sarah pulled out a yellowing piece of paper. It looked old. It was a scanned copy of the original account opening form for Rogue Wave Holdings in the Caymans. You said Lucian wanted you to have this money. You said he promised you he would divorce Catherine. You said you were his true wife. Sarah slid the yellow paper across the granite. Look at the signature line for the beneficiary in case of death on the original account form. Jessica looked. She expected to see her name, or maybe a blank space. But there, in Lucian's sprawling, arrogant handwriting, was a name. Beneficiary? Catherine Sterling. Jessica stared at it. The world seemed to tilt. He put her name, Jessica whispered. Lucian was a narcissist, Sarah said brutally. He stole from Catherine's charity to pad his own ego, to feel rich. But he knew, deep down, that if he ever got caught, or if he died, the money had to go back to the source to avoid a scandal. He never planned to give you that money, Jessica. He never planned to leave her. You were a distraction. But his money? His safety net? He tied it right back to the woman who controlled him. This is a lie, Jessica whispered. It is a bank document, Sarah corrected, and it proves two things. 1. The money belongs to the Sterling Hope Foundation. 2. Even in his secret life, Lucian Sterling knew who really owned him. Sarah closed her folder. We are countersuing, Ms. Miller. Not only are we moving to dismiss your claim, but the Sterling estate is suing you for the return of all gifts purchased with embezzled funds. The condo, the Mercedes, the jewellery. It was all bought with stolen charity money. And we want it back. Jessica slumped into her chair. The white suit felt like a straitjacket. The camera lens looked like the barrel of a gun. She had walked in fighting for $12 million. She was about to walk out, owing $400,000 and facing an FBI inquiry. But the drama wasn't over, because as Jessica sat there, broken, the door to the conference room opened. Catherine Sterling walked in. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like an executioner. The air in the conference room had changed. It was no longer a legal battleground. It felt like a surgical theatre where a life was being dismantled, piece by piece. Catherine Sterling stood at the end of the table. She didn't shout. She didn't throw things. She simply placed her hands on the back of the empty chair at the head of the table, Lucienne's chair, and looked down at Jessica. Jessica Miller, usually so defiant, so sure of her youthful power, shrank back. Up close, Catherine didn't look like a defeated widow. She looked like a monolith. Her eyes were dry, clear, and terrifyingly intelligent. You asked for a deeper accounting, Miss Miller, Catherine said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it echoed off the glass walls. And now you have it. You wanted to know the depths of Lucian's love? You just found it. He loved himself enough to steal from dying children, and he loved you enough to make you an accomplice. I didn't know, Jessica sobbed, her hands clutching the edge of the table. I swear I thought he was rich. He acted rich. He acted rich because he was spending money that wasn't his, Catherine corrected. She walked slowly around the table, the heels of her shoes sinking into the plush carpet, making no sound. She stopped right behind Jessica's chair. Arthur Harrington, the lawyer who had been so bombastic an hour ago, was now furiously packing his briefcase. He smelled a disbarment hearing coming if he stayed too close to this radioactive mess. Miss Miller, Catherine said softly, that necklace you are wearing, the sapphire pendant. Jessica's hand flew to her throat, covering the stone. He gave this to me for our anniversary. That is a Burmese sapphire, Catherine said, staring at the back of Jessica's head. It cost $42,000. I saw the withdrawal slip this morning. It was taken from the emergency grant fund of the Sterling Hope Foundation. That fund was designed to pay for experimental chemotherapy for families who had been denied by insurance. Jessica froze. The stone suddenly felt heavy, hot against her skin. Take it off, Catherine commanded. Not a request, a rightful order. It's mine, Jessica whimpered, but the fight was gone. It is evidence in a felony embezzlement case, Sarah Jenkins interjected from across the table, her pen poised. If you walk out of this room with it, you are in possession of stolen goods. That's 5 years in prison, Jessica. Minimum. With trembling fingers, Jessica unclasped the necklace. The gold chain slithered through her fingers and hit the granite table with a hollow clink. The earrings, Catherine said. Clink. The tennis bracelet. Clink. The keys to the Mercedes parked downstairs. Jessica looked up, mascara streaming down her face, her eyes pleading. Catherine, please. If I lose the car, I can't get to work. I don't have anything left. I gave up my apartment. I have nowhere to go. Catherine's expression didn't waver. There was no pity, only a grim satisfaction. You have the youth you are so proud of, Catherine said. You have the freedom Lucian claimed I stole from him. Use them. But you will not keep 1 cent of the money stolen from my foundation. Jessica placed the heavy electronic key fob on the pile of jewelry. It was a small pile, glittering under the fluorescent lights, a pile that represented 3 years of her life, 3 years of being the other woman, of believing she was the winner. Now it was just a pile of cold rocks and plastic. Arthur Harrington stood up. My client is overwhelmed. We are ending this deposition. 1 moment, Sarah Jenkins said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. Arthur looked at it. What is this? A settlement agreement, Sarah said. We will agree not to press criminal charges against Miss Miller for conspiracy and receipt of stolen property. We will frame her involvement as unwitting to the FBI. Jessica looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. You won't send me to jail? On one condition, Catherine cut in. She leaned down, her face inches from Jessica's. You will vacate the Bellevue condo by noon tomorrow. You will return every single gift, down to the designer handbags, and you will sign a statement admitting that the codicil on the napkin was signed while Lucian was under the influence of alcohol and is invalid. You walk away with nothing. No money, no car, no story to sell to the tabloids. If I see your name in the press, if I see you on a talk show, the deal is void, and I will let the federal prosecutors eat you alive. Jessica looked at the paper. It was a surrender. It was a confession of total defeat. I have to go back to being a waitress, Jessica whispered, the reality crashing down. I have debts. I have credit card bills. Then I suggest you pick up extra shifts, Catherine said, straightening up and smoothing her jacket. The Rusty Spoon is hiring, I checked. Jessica signed. Her hand shook so badly the signature was barely legible. As Jessica and her lawyer fled the room, a humiliated girl and a defeated shark. Catherine didn't smile. She walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline, the skyline Lucian claimed he built. "Are you okay, Catherine?" Sarah asked gently, gathering the jewelry into an evidence bag. "He didn't just cheat on me, Sarah," Catherine said, her voice breaking for the first time. "He made me an accessory. He used my name, my reputation, my charity, to buy her love. He turned my life's work into a slush fund for his midlife crisis." She turned from the window. The tears were there now, but they were angry tears. "Liquidate everything in that Cayman account," Catherine ordered. "Put it all back into the foundation, every penny. And Sarah?" "Yes?" "Make sure the locks are changed on the condo by 12:01 p.m. 3 days later, the rain had stopped, replaced by a cold, biting wind that whipped off the Puget Sound. Jessica Miller stood on the sidewalk outside the Bellevue Heights complex. Beside her were 3 cardboard boxes and a suitcase with a broken wheel. It was everything she owned. The doorman, a man named Henry, who used to open the door for her with a smile, and a "Good evening, Ms. Miller," now stood with his arms crossed, watching to make sure she left the premises. "My Uber is coming," Jessica muttered, pulling her coat tighter. It was a cheap coat from Target. The Burberry trench coat had been surrendered yesterday. Henry didn't reply. He just watched. She looked up at the balcony on the 14th floor. The balcony where she and Lucian had drunk champagne. The balcony where he had written that napkin note. It looked so small from down here. Just a slab of concrete in the sky. Her phone buzzed. It was a notification from her bank. Balance alert. Minus $420. The legal fees for Arthur Harrington had gone through before she could cancel the check. She was 25 years old. She was thousands of dollars in debt. She had a reputation that was currently being whispered about in every law office in Seattle, and she was waiting for a shared Uber pool to take her to her sister's couch in Tacoma. She had gambled her youth on a man she thought was a king, only to find out he was a jester who stole the crown. Miles away, in the sprawling Sterling estate, the atmosphere was quiet. Catherine sat in Lucian's private study. For 30 years, she had rarely entered this room. It was his sanctuary. Now, it was a crime scene of mediocrity. Boxes were stacked everywhere. Sarah and a forensic accountant were going through every piece of paper, every hard drive, every receipt. "We found something," Sarah said, walking in from the library. She held a small digital voice recorder. It was taped under his desk drawer. Lucien loved the sound of his own voice. He used it to dictate memos, ideas, and apparently a diary. Catherine took the device. It was old, scuffed plastic. "Do I want to hear this?" Catherine asked. "You need to hear the entry from the day he opened the Cayman account," Sarah said. "It clarifies things." Catherine pressed play. The tape hissed, and then Lucien's voice filled the room. He sounded younger, more arrogant, but with that underlying whine she knew so well. "July 14th. Just left the bank. It's done. Rogue Wave is active. Catherine suspects nothing. She's so busy saving the whales or the orphans or whatever the hell she does. She doesn't look at the books anymore. She trusts me." A pause. The sound of ice clinking in a glass. "I need this money. I need to feel like I'm the one in charge. If I have my own pile, I don't have to beg her for investment capital. I can be the big man. I can walk into a room and know I have 10 million in the pocket that nobody knows about." Catherine listened, her face stony. "And Jessica? God, she's expensive. Pretty, but exhausting. Lucian, when are you leaving her? Lucian, I want a car. Lucian, look at this dress. She's a bottomless pit, but she looks at me like I'm Superman. Catherine looks at me like I'm a project, a disappointment." Catherine closed her eyes. "I'll keep Jessica around for now. She's good for the ego. But if push comes to shove, If the IRS sniffs around? I set the beneficiary to Catherine. It's my fail-safe. If I die, the money goes back to the wife. The frantic accounting error is discovered, and I look like a sloppy businessman, not a thief. Catherine will clean it up. She always cleans it up. She's the only one loyal enough to save my reputation, even if I don't deserve it. The recording clicked off. The silence in the room was heavy. Lucian hadn't loved Jessica. He saw her as a bill he had to pay for an ego boost, and he hadn't respected Catherine, but he had relied on her competence. He had weaponized her loyalty. He knew she would fix his mess, even from beyond the grave. He was right, Catherine said, placing the recorder on the desk. I am cleaning it up. You shouldn't have to, Sarah said, her voice thick with anger on her friend's behalf. We should release this. Destroy his name. Let the world know who he really was. No, Catherine said firmly. She stood up, walking over to the fireplace where a fire was crackling. If I destroy his name, I destroy the foundation. Donors don't give money to a charity founded by an embezzler. If I burn his reputation, I burn the pediatric wing at the hospital. I burn the scholarships. She picked up the yellow bank document, the one that proved Lucian had listed her as the beneficiary, the document that had saved her fortune and destroyed Jessica's life. Lucian was a small, sad man, Catherine said, tossing the yellow paper into the fire. She watched the edges curl and blacken. He doesn't get to destroy anything else. We will announce a generous posthumous donation from Lucian's private estate to the foundation. We will paint him as a saint, and I will run the company alone, as I should have done 20 years ago. And Jessica? Sarah asked. Catherine watched the paper turn to ash. She learned a lesson that Lucien never did, Catherine said. She learned that there is no such thing as free money. She's paying her tuition now. Catherine turned back to her lawyer, her face calm, the grief finally replaced by a steely resolve. Close the files, Sarah. We have work to do, and I believe I'm overdue for a vacation. Somewhere far away from the Cayman Islands. 6 months later, the lunch rush at the Daily Grind diner in Tacoma was finally dying down. The air smelled of burnt coffee and frying grease, a scent that clung to Jessica's hair and clothes like a second skin. She wiped down table 4, tossing the dirty napkins into a bin. Her feet throbbed. The high heels she used to wear, the Louboutins Lucia had bought her, were long gone, sold to a consignment shop to pay for her deposit on a studio apartment. Now she wore sensible, non-slip sneakers that cost $40. Jess, table 6 needs a refill, the manager shouted from the kitchen window. Coming, Jessica muttered. She walked over to table 6. A businessman in a grey suit was sitting there, reading the Seattle Times while he finished his club sandwich. He looked vaguely like Lucian, same age, same haircut. For a second, Jessica's heart jumped, a phantom reflex of her old life. But when he looked up, he was just a stranger with mustard on his tie. Coffee? She asked. Please, he said, not looking away from the paper. As she poured, her eyes caught the headline on the front page he was holding. Sterling Foundation unveils new pediatric cancer wing. Below the headline was a large colour photo. It showed Catherine Sterling standing at a podium, cutting a red ribbon. She looked radiant, powerful, and untouchable. Beside her stood the governor. The article mentioned a massive anonymous donation that had made the expansion possible. Jessica's hand shook, splashing a few drops of hot coffee onto the saucer. Watch it, the man snapped. I'm sorry, Jessica whispered, grabbing a rag. I'm so sorry. She stared at the photo of Catherine, the woman who had dismantled her life with a single sentence and a yellowing piece of paper. Jessica realized now that she had never really known Lucian Sterling. She knew the version of him that spent money to feel important. But Catherine knew the version of him that was weak, the version that needed a safety net. Lucian had used Jessica to feel like a king, but in the end, he had trusted the Queen to clean up his mess. Jessica finished her shift and walked out into the grey afternoon. She waited at the bus stop, the cold wind biting through her thin jacket. A sleek black Mercedes drove past, splashing water from a puddle onto the curb. Jessica didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just watched the tail lights fade into the distance. She reached into her pocket and touched the only thing she had left from that time, the cheap plastic name tag she wore now. Jessica. Just Jessica. The fortune, the glamour, the promise of a life she hadn't earned. It was all gone. She had learned the hardest lesson of all. The only thing you truly own in this world is what you build with your own hands. Everything else can be taken away by a single sheet of paper. In the end, Jessica Miller learned that there is a profound difference between a price tag and value. She saw Lucian Sterling as a lottery ticket, a shortcut to a life of luxury she felt she deserved simply for being present. She mistook his narcissism for love and his spending for security. But Catherine Sterling understood the game better than anyone. She knew that real power isn't about the money you flash. It's about the control you maintain when the doors are closed. By using the very document Lucian created to hide his deceit, Catherine not only saved her fortune, but protected her husband's fragile legacy for the greater good. She turned a story of betrayal into a legacy of charity, proving that dignity is the one asset that cannot be bought, sold, or stolen. Lucian died trying to play both sides, but in the courtroom of life, the house always wins. Wow, what a reality check. Jessica thought she had the golden ticket, but she forgot to check who actually owned the factory. It just goes to show, if you build your castle on someone else's foundation, don't be surprised when it crumbles. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Do you think Catherine was too harsh on Jessica? Or did the mistress get exactly what she deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss a new story. We've got a lot more drama coming your way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.